And finally, for those of us in the know, Totik's doctoral dissertation concentrated mainly on what we call contextualization. As throughout these presentations, and especially on the first lecture, we've heard how close to Totik's heart was it to see a decolonization, to get to overcome the colonial mentality that has subjugated us. We have to raise to bring that which is underneath to the surface, which will then replace that colonial mentality. Um, it's a fun thing to think of, but I think the interfaith gathering that we had just showed that what can happen and how that can happen. And so it's not that it's impossible. It's just making sure we're intentional about um, fighting that colonial mentality within us. The significance of Bulletow's theory for decolonizing process of our colonial mentality is indicative of the struggle that Filipinos have been sorting through and wrestling with for decades since we supposedly claimed our independence after World War II. We have this seemingly love-hate relationship with the West. The nationalist in us is offended when we are compared as inferior to the West. Yet, when a relative gives us a balikbayan gift, like a shirt, we get offended if the item is made in the Philippines instead of stateside. Again, this morning it was raised. If any, the negating force of the underside level is actually yearning to be expressed and demonstrated on the surface. And this signifies our desire and our hope to liberate our Filipino consciousness from colonial mentality on the surface. Now, granted, when we decolonize, we are actually intentionally committing ourselves to changing the very systems that have been affected by colonial mentality. This, however, is a prophetic act of decolonizing. It is messy, it is self-critiquing, it forces us to have a face-to-face confrontation with a past that privileges those who are considered part of the social, cultural, and even religious majority sector of our society. And bottom line, decolonizing requires us and our institutions to give up or empty ourselves of these privileges and power. This is necessary, however, if we don't. This is necessary because if we don't, we will continue to expose ourselves to the oppressive control of the memories of our colonizers who have long left the land but have managed to demonize and oppress us in our consciousness. When Todik left the Philippines, ironically, he settled in the land of the American colonizers, wherein our consciousness is no longer victimized and subjugated by our colonial mentality. To Totik, he needed to hear the confessions of the colonizers to eventually to tell him, you are now our expert. We are not experts over you. And I think at some point, that's what we're looking for that space.
In fact, when I hear you, when I listen to you, and I don't look at you, you sound like an American.
Canadian.
Canadian. That is why I feel that language could be used either way. In fact, if you look at what happened during the time of Dr. Jose Rizal, he used Spanish to write El Filibusterismo and Noling Mitangere. In recent days, we had Renato Constantino, a past revisited, where many of our activist students drank from his analysis of the Philippine